When Mariam, a gentle black woman from a humble background, marries the heir of a wealthy business family, she believes love can overcome class. But when jealousy brews inside the mansion walls, her in-laws turn her life into torment. One night, they cross a line that leaves her in the hospital, and her unborn child at risk. As she fights to recover, her husband uncovers the truth. The man once silent now becomes her protector, using his power and wealth not for revenge, but for redemption and justice. What they meant for her ruin becomes the moment she rises higher than ever before. Moral: true strength isn't in vengeance. It's in standing up for what's right and healing with grace. The rain came down soft and steady over the sprawling Adeyemi estate, the sound of it against the marble roof, a rhythm Mariam had come to associate with loneliness. She sat by the window of the guest room, dressed in a simple cream gown, her fingers tracing slow circles on her belly. At 4 months pregnant, every heartbeat beneath her palm was a miracle. But miracles, she had learned, were fragile things, especially in a house where love was treated like a weakness. Mariam had grown up in a modest neighborhood of Lagos, the daughter of a seamstress and a local school teacher. Her mother used to say, "Kindness will make a woman glow brighter than gold." It was that same glow that had first caught Tunde Adeyemi's attention, the young, charming heir to one of Nigeria's largest construction empires. They'd met when Mariam came to deliver custom-made suits to the Adeyemi Group's annual gala. While the other guests had brushed past her without a glance, Tunde had stopped her in the hallway. "You made these?" he'd asked, holding up the perfectly fitted jacket she'd stitched for his assistant. When she nodded shyly, he smiled. A real smile, not the polished one he wore in the magazines. By the end of the evening, he had offered to take her out for coffee. By the end of the month, he was visiting her parents' home, sitting cross-legged on their old couch, eating fried plantains like he belonged there. And by the end of the year, he was asking her to marry him. Their wedding had been small but beautiful. Mariam had insisted on it, though the Adeyemi family had wanted something grand. His mother, Mrs. Adeyemi, had frowned through most of the ceremony, her gold jewelry gleaming against her cold stare. "She's simple," she had whispered to her sister during the vows, "and simple girls don't survive in houses like ours." Tunde had promised Mariam that love would be enough, that he would protect her from the arrogance of his family, from the sharp comments and silent treatment. And for a while he did. They traveled. They laughed. They dreamed. But then came the pregnancy, and with it, everything changed. The first time his mother made her feel unwelcome, it had been subtle. "You're carrying an Adeyemi child," she'd said, setting a silver tray down beside Mariam. "Remember, this family has a reputation to maintain. Don't embarrass us with your background." The second time, it was sharper. "I told Tunde not to marry you," she'd hissed one morning when Mariam walked into the dining room. "And now look, he's barely home. You've trapped him, haven't you?" Clever girl. And the third time, it was cruel. "You think this child makes you part of us? No, you'll never be one of us. Not even if you give birth to 10 heirs." Each word was a knife that Mariam swallowed with silence. She didn't tell Tunde. She didn't want to seem like the fragile wife who couldn't handle family pressure. He was always busy with meetings, traveling between Abuja and London, building new projects, and she knew he was trying to secure their future. So she endured. But in the vast emptiness of that mansion, whispers grew into laughter, laughter into cruelty. The servants followed the tone set by their mistress. Her meals were delayed, her room left uncleaned. They talked about her in Yoruba when they thought she couldn't understand. Only Mama Grace, the elderly housemaid, showed her kindness. "My daughter," she would say, pressing her wrinkled hand over Mariam's belly, "God's light shines brightest in darkness. Don't let their wickedness dim yours." Mariam smiled and thanked her. But even light flickers when surrounded by shadow. One evening, after another lonely dinner, Mariam stood outside under the veranda watching the rain fall. She was craving Tunde's voice, his warmth, something to remind her that she wasn't completely alone in this fortress of marble and cruelty. So she called him. It rang and rang until he picked up. "Mariam?" His voice was tired. "I'm in a meeting, love. Can we talk later?" Her heart dipped a little. "I just wanted to hear your voice." He sighed softly, the kind that carried affection but distance. "I'll be home in 2 days, okay?" "Promise." She whispered goodnight and hung up. pressing the phone against her chest. What she didn't know was that those 2 days would change everything. The following morning, Mrs. Adeyemi invited her to breakfast. It was unusual, too kind. "Sit, my dear," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I made you tea." Mariam hesitated but sat. The tea smelled strange, sweet but off, like something burned. She took one sip and her stomach twisted. Mrs. Adeyemi leaned forward. "You see, dear, some families protect their legacy. You are not legacy material." Mariam set the cup down, dizzy. "What are you—" But her vision blurred, her breath short. The room spun. When she woke up, Mama Grace was by her bedside, crying. "Don't move, child. I found you on the floor. God was with you." Tears burned her eyes. The baby, her baby. She felt its faint kick and sobbed with relief. 2 days later, Tunde returned. He found his wife pale, weak, and silent. When she told him what had happened, he froze, his jaw tightening, his eyes darkening in a way she had never seen. "Did she hurt you?" he asked, voice trembling. "Tunde, please," she whispered. "Don't start a war in your own family." He didn't answer. He only said, "No one hurts my family," and walks away. That night, he sat in his office watching security footage of the estate. His family's empire had eyes everywhere, and now so did he. And what he saw on those tapes would burn through every shred of forgiveness he had left. Tunde sat alone in his study that night, the blue glow of the surveillance screen flickering across his face. His heart felt like a stone sinking deeper with every replayed second. There, in the grainy footage, he saw his mother placing something in the teacup. He saw her smirk as Mariam fainted. He saw the servants hesitate and then turn away. He pressed pause, his hand shaking slightly. For years, he had believed that his family's power and name made them untouchable. But that illusion shattered in the quiet hum of the office that night. When dawn came, the first light painted his eyes with clarity. His mother's cruelty had almost taken everything from him. And yet, the woman she tried to break was still here, breathing, fragile, but alive. He turned off the screen. "This won't be about anger," he whispered to himself. "It'll be about truth." The next morning, he called his assistant, Damilola. "Find me the best legal team in Lagos," Tunde said calmly. "For what matter, sir?" "My family," he replied. "And make sure they specialize in inheritance fraud and criminal neglect." Damilola froze. "Sir, is everything all right?" Tunde's voice softened. "It will be. Soon." He closed his laptop, then went to Mariam's room. She was sitting by the window, reading from her mother's worn Bible. The sunlight fell across her face, and for a moment, he saw the same strength that had once drawn him to her. The quiet dignity she never lost, even when the world turned cruel. "Did you sleep?" he asked gently. "A little," she said. Her eyes searched his. "You found something, didn't you?" He didn't lie. "Yes, but I need you to trust me. I won't let them hurt you again. Not with words. Not with lies. Not with anything," she nodded slowly. "Tunde, don't fight evil with more evil. Promise me." He took her hand, kissed her palm, and said the words that would define what came next. "I promise. I'll fight them with truth." 3 days later, Tunde held a family meeting at the mansion. His father, his mother, his younger siblings, all gathered around the long glass table, unaware that the storm had already begun. "Tunde, what's this about?" his father asked, frowning. Tunde placed a tablet in the center of the table and pressed play. The room filled with silence as the footage rolled. The tea, the smirk, the faint. Then the gasp from one of the servants. And finally, the image of Mama Grace rushing in to help. Mrs. Adeyemi went pale. "Tunde, you misunderstand—" "No," he cut her off, his tone calm but sharp. "I understand perfectly. You tried to destroy my wife because you never saw her as one of us." His father rubbed his temples. "This is shameful, Tunde, but must we make a scene?" He turned to him, his eyes hard. "A scene? She almost lost our child. She lost her peace. And all because you both think legacy matters more than humanity." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Then, Tunde slid a brown envelope across the table. "These are legal papers," he said quietly. "The Adeyemi group will be restructured. I'm taking over the board. And before you say anything, yes, it's legal. You handed me proxy control years ago when you were expanding in London. His father's face tightened, but he didn't protest. He knew Tunde well enough to recognize finality when he heard it. Mrs. Adeyemi's voice trembled. You would turn against your own mother? I'm not turning against you, he said. I'm turning toward what's right. When he left the room, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt hollow. Justice was necessary, but it never felt clean. That night, he sat by Mariam's bedside and told her everything. She listened silently, her hand resting over her stomach. You did the right thing, she said softly. Now let's do something even better. What do you mean? She smiled faintly. Let's build something good from this pain. For women like me, for girls who think kindness makes them weak. In the weeks that followed, Mariam began to heal. She met with her doctor regularly, took slow walks in the garden, and spent long hours with Mama Grace, who had become her closest friend. But behind the scenes, Tunde was laying groundwork for something larger. He called it the Mariam Foundation. Its goal, to support women in crisis, those trapped in abusive homes, suffering from discrimination, or silenced by power. He used his business connections, media presence, and influence to shine light where others wanted darkness. Soon, every major outlet in Lagos was talking about the new charity led by the young couple who refused to stay silent. People admired their strength, but few knew the full truth behind it. Months later, the day finally came. Mariam gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Ayo, meaning joy. As she held him in her arms, tears filled her eyes. Do you think he'll grow up to forgive them? She asked softly. Tunde looked at his son and then at her. He'll grow up to know the difference between power and goodness. That's enough. Meanwhile, justice took its quiet course. The servants who had stayed silent during the poisoning were dismissed. Mrs. Adeyemi was publicly removed from her position on the family's charity board. The old woman retreated into privacy, her pride stripped bare, but instead of gloating, Mariam sent her flowers every month. The note always said the same thing. Forgiveness is the final victory. At first, there was no response. But one morning, a letter arrived. My daughter, it read in shaky handwriting. I was wrong. I see now that legacy is not blood or money, it is the good we leave behind. You are the real heir of this family. If God forgives me, I hope someday you will too. Mariam pressed the letter to her chest and wept. 1 year later, the Mariam Foundation opened its first shelter for women in Lagos. Cameras flashed as the ribbon was cut. Mariam stood tall, her husband beside her, their son in her arms. She took the microphone, her voice trembling only slightly. There was a time when I thought silence was safety, she said. But silence feeds injustice. Today, we stand for every woman who thought her voice didn't matter. Because when we speak truth, even softly, it shakes the ground beneath cruelty. The crowd erupted in applause. In that moment, Mariam looked up at the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She felt infinite. 6 months had passed since the Mariam Foundation opened its doors, and the name Adeyemi was being redefined across the city. What had once been a family known for luxury and power was now being spoken of in the same breath as charity, integrity, and justice. But old pride dies hard. In the quiet corridors of their secluded estate, Mr. and Mrs. Adeyemi were planning their return. They couldn't stand being whispered about, pitied by people they once entertained. To them, the foundation wasn't redemption, it was rebellion. We raised that boy to be strong, Mr. Adeyemi muttered, pacing the living room. Now he bows to that girl's morality. His wife folded her arms. Then we'll remind him who built this empire. 2 weeks later, Tunde and Mariam received a letter from the National Business Ethics Council. It was brief, but explosive. Subject: Allegations of financial mismanagement, the Mariam Foundation. An anonymous complaint has been filed regarding misuse of charitable funds. Please provide a formal response within 72 hours. Mariam read it twice, her breath catching. Who would... But before she could finish, Tunde's phone buzzed. A news alert flashed. Adeyemi charity faces fraud inquiry. It was everywhere within hours. Morning shows, radio stations, even online gossip pages. The foundation's donations froze overnight. Partners withdrew, and suddenly the same world that had applauded them turned suspicious. Tunde clenched his fists. It's them, he said quietly. They're trying to destroy everything we built. Mariam exhaled slowly. Then we'll fight, not in secret this time. We'll fight with facts. For the next 3 days, their office lights stayed on until dawn. The legal team gathered every document, every transaction, every signed receipt. Tunda personally combed through the accounts, double-checking every figure. Mariam, calm and composed, recorded a short video statement. Her face was tired but firm. We built the Mariam Foundation not to gain, but to give. Every naira donated has gone to women's shelters, medical care, and education. We will cooperate fully with the investigation. Our conscience is clear. The video went viral. People shared it, calling her brave, transparent, and dignified. Still, the investigation loomed. On the 4th day, they attended a closed hearing with the council. A long mahogany table separated the committee from the accused. Cameras flashed outside the building. Mrs. Adeyemi was there too, sitting at the back with her lawyer, wearing her signature gold jewelry and a smile that didn't belong in that room. When the proceedings began, the lead investigator opened a file. We've reviewed the complaint. It alleges that the Mariam Foundation redirected N50 million into a private account. Gasps echoed. The investigator turned to Tunde. Mr. Adeyemi, do you have an explanation? Tunde stood. Yes, I do. He clicked a remote. A large screen came to life, displaying a trail of digital records. These, he said, are internal transfers made through our parent company's charitable arm. The account in question, he zoomed in, belongs not to my wife or myself, but to Adeyemi Holdings Limited. And who authorized those transactions? He paused, then pressed play on a short video clip. On screen appeared Mrs. Adeyemi at her home office, giving instructions to the company accountant. Move the funds through the foundation's account, she said. If anyone asks, say it was a donation refund. That will teach them not to take my son away. The room fell silent. The sound of her voice echoed like thunder. The investigator slowly removed his glasses. This is clear evidence of deliberate defamation and embezzlement. Mrs. Adeyemi, you have anything to say? She stood trembling. I only meant to protect the family's name. Mariam turned her gaze toward her, calm, unflinching. You tried to destroy it instead. By the end of the session, the committee cleared the Mariam Foundation of all charges. A press release followed within hours. No wrongdoing found. The Adeyemi Foundation remains an example of ethical leadership. But that wasn't the end. The council recommended legal action against those who filed false reports. The court later ruled that Mrs. Adeyemi and her accomplices must publicly apologize and pay restitution to the foundation for damages. The story became national news. Headlines read, "The woman they tried to silence now teaches a nation integrity." Weeks later, Tunde and Mariam held a quiet dinner to thank their team. The mood was light, hopeful. When the guests left, Mariam and Tunde stood on their balcony, city lights twinkling below. You could have humiliated her in public, Mariam said softly. Why didn't you? He smiled faintly. Because she already learned her lesson, and because you taught me that justice doesn't need noise, it just needs truth. Mariam leaned into his shoulder. Then let's keep using it that way. He wrapped an arm around her. Always. Below them, the city hummed with life. 1,000 stories of struggle and resilience unfolding at once. But tonight, for the Adeyemis, there was peace. Not the silence of fear, but the stillness that follows when truth finally wins. 6 months later, the Adeyemi name was no longer associated with scandal, wealth, or social dominance. It stood for something far greater. Resilience, integrity, redemption. The Mariam Foundation had grown beyond what anyone expected. New branches had opened in Lagos, Accra, and Nairobi, each offering scholarships, healthcare, and housing for abused women and children. The foundation's logo, a dove rising from broken chains, had become a quiet symbol of hope. But the woman behind it all still bore her scars. Every night, Mariam would pause by the mirror before bed, her eyes resting on the faint burn marks on her wrist, the last physical reminders of what her in-laws had done to her. She didn't hide them anymore. They were part of her truth, part of the testimony that made her voice stronger. And yet, something inside her still felt unfinished. The invitation one morning. Mariam received an envelope from the National Forum on Women's Empowerment. She was being honored as Woman of the Year. Tunde was overjoyed, but Mariam hesitated. I'll accept it, she said quietly. but only if my past walks into that room with me. He didn't fully understand at first. But on the night of the event, under golden lights, surrounded by journalists and cameras, it became clear what she meant. As she walked up to the stage, Mariam paused halfway, turning toward the back of the hall. Everyone followed her gaze and gasped. Her in-laws, Mr. and Mrs. Adeyemi, stood there in plain clothes, escorted by staff. They looked older, smaller, and painfully out of place. Tunde's jaw tightened, but Mariam's expression was calm. When she reached the podium, she didn't start with her achievements. She began with her scars. 2 years ago, she said, her voice steady, I was told that I would never walk again. That my voice would be forgotten. That no one would ever see my worth because I was just a woman. And worse, one who dared to speak. But today I stand not to boast about what I've built, but to thank those who tried to break me. Because without their cruelty, I would never have found my purpose. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. The cameras zoomed in on her in-laws, tears welled in Mrs. Adeyemi's eyes. Mariam continued. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over poison. It means saying, you don't get to control my story anymore. She looked directly at them. And so tonight I forgive you. For a few long seconds, no one moved. Then slowly, Mrs. Adeyemi stood, trembling, and walked toward the stage. She fell to her knees in front of Mariam, her voice breaking. I don't deserve this mercy, she whispered. But thank you for showing me what strength really looks like. Mariam bent down and lifted her up. You're right, she said softly. You didn't deserve it. But neither did I deserve what you did. And yet, here we are, both standing. The entire room rose in applause. After the applause later that night, as the crowd dispersed and the city lights flickered through the tall windows, Tunde joined Mariam on the balcony of the event hall. He smiled. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. She looked at him, eyes glistening. Revenge gives you silence. Forgiveness gives you peace. He wrapped an arm around her. You've changed everything. Not just our name, but how people see women like you. She nodded, gazing at the horizon. No one should ever be ashamed of surviving. Epilogue. 1 year later, a soft breeze blew across the quiet courtyard of the Mariam Foundation's newest center, built on land that once belonged to the Adeyemi family estate. Children laughed in the background, women chatted under the trees, and a golden plaque stood near the entrance. It read, For every woman who was told she couldn't, and did. Nearby, Mariam taught a small class of young girls. She wore simple clothes, no jewelry, no makeup, just a radiant calmness that came from finally being free. A reporter approached her, asking, Mrs. Adeyemi, what message would you give to women watching your story? Mariam smiled warmly. Never let your pain be the reason you stop believing in yourself. Let it be the reason you rise higher. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's how you take your power back. The camera zoomed in on her face, the same woman who once lay in a hospital bed. Broken and forgotten, now standing tall, surrounded by lives she had changed, her smile said it all. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had purpose and peace. And even the deepest wounds can give birth to purpose. True strength isn't in revenge, it's in forgiveness. Because healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about building a future where that pain no longer defines you.